All right, welcome back to the Artist Connection podcast. This is Matt Kesar here with my very special guest today, Judy Chaikin. Welcome, Judy.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Before we started recording, we were just talking about your latest movie, The Girls in the Band.
Mm-hmm.
You're the director, the writer, producer.
Yes.
You did it all?
Not by myself.
It's a team.
I did the directing part of myself. But the writing, I had a partner who was Edward Osejima, who was also my editor. And the producing, I had several partners, including Hugh Hefner.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, it's out now on DVD and video on demand.
Yes, it's finally gotten out to the world at large. We've been playing festivals and concerts and all kinds of screenings all over the world for the past 2 years, and we were in theaters for about 22 weeks. So now they finally released a DVD, which is kind of interesting because nobody's releasing DVDs anymore. And our distributor got a lot of orders for DVDs, so we have put out what we call the collector's edition.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it has a lot of really wonderful extra bonuses on it. We spent a lot of time doing it because we wanted to make it something that people would not just watch one time, but that they would keep in their collection and, refer back to, because there's a lot of reference material on it as well.
Well, that's the danger of our modern age, where a lot of stuff is digital, and if you watch it on demand, you watch it and then maybe you move on to the next. But when you buy something, when you commit to buying something tangible, and I do it. I mean, I'm a mass consumer of all things media, vinyl records, CDs, and I download things as well, MP3s, and watch movies on demand. But you can't beat being interested in something and then having that to refer to later on a Sunday afternoon. Maybe you want to give the movie a spin again, and you just grab it off the shelf and you watch it again.
Well, I think one of the things that happened when we were contemplating this DVD is that our distributor got a lot of people coming back and saying, is there any follow-up to this? Is there any more? Are you going to do another, version? Because are you going to explore more women? Because you're limited in an 88-minute movie,
right,
how much you can explore. So that was why we decided to do the collector's edition, so that we could talk about some of those other people and add some of that other material that we were unable to get into the movie. So, we wanted people who wanted to collect the DVD to really have something special.
Oh, well, that's great. So I was telling you that I have a huge music collection, and going way back, not just current stuff. I mean, I love music from the 30s and 40s, and I was amazed watching your movie how little I knew about the female influence in music from that time.
Yeah.
It's staggering to see the amount of talent, and I guess you're going to find through this interview as I talk about these different things, I'm definitely naive on a lot of this stuff, because I guess my assumption was, when I didn't see a lot of women, or I didn't have a lot of female female artists in my album collection, maybe they just weren't into that. Maybe they just weren't making that music. That's why they're missing.
That was the assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reality was that they couldn't get recorded, they couldn't get gigs, they couldn't get the contracts that the men were able to get. And so consequently, nobody ever heard about them.
Yeah.
So we had to really go digging into people's personal histories, into all kinds of archives. A lot of it came from Europe, where they did have better recognition, because
right,
the Europeans love American jazz. So we found a lot of footage in Germany and France and Sweden and all over the world. But these women, they were out there. They just didn't get the recognition they deserved.
And it's not for lack of talent, because they could play. My God.
Yeah, when I started to make the film, that was one of the benchmarks I gave myself. I said, I'm going to research this. If these women can't really play, if they aren't as good as the men who were playing it those days, I don't want to make a false documentary
right,
trying to pump them up. What I found was such remarkable talent that it made me understand that when someone is a born musician, that gift is given equally to men and women.
Oh, it certainly is.
And these women were naturals. They were born. Some of them, like at 5 years old, were already playing instruments. They could play piano by ear. It was just, they were gifted musicians. And that's what convinced me that, This is a real story.
Another naive opinion I guess I had was that in the entertainment world, obviously I knew segregation and sexism and all those things existed, but I just thought in entertainment, I thought folks were immune to that to some degree, because if you're talented and people want to be entertained, whether you're a racist or a sexist or whatever you are, you want to see somebody who's good up on that stage at what they do, so entertain me. But boy, it goes way deeper than that. I mean, you touch on some subjects as you go through the decades with these women that they had to put up with a lot of
Yeah,
things.
they sure did. Well, you know, what you're saying is true. A great entertainer cuts across all barriers. But when there were actually laws and legal reasons
Right.
why people could not play in front of certain audiences, that's a different story.
Sure is.
So when the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, which is an all-black band, when they had to hire a lead alto sax player, and they couldn't find anybody right away, they hired a white girl. And what they ran into was the most incredible Jim Crow experience, where they had to literally take this white girl and hide her under the back seat of their band bus where they stored the instruments when they went through towns in the South, because the sheriffs would stop them. They would get on the bus. They would walk down the aisles. They would shine flashlights in their eyes and on their faces, if it was at night, to see what kind of race mixing was going on the band. It was tremendously dangerous and frightening. So it was it was a legalized racism. So it was a terrible, terrible time.
And it's a time that I was born in '69, so I grew up, educated in the '70s and '80s.
Mm-hmm.
And in the history books, to say that it doesn't touch on any of this is an understatement. I mean,
yeah, right.
I've seen pictures, of course, as a little kid. I saw pictures of, black and white pictures of whites-only water fountains and
Right.
things like that in the South, and of course the sit-ins at the, at the lunch counters. So I was obviously aware of it, but it's not until you watch something like this, or maybe if a movie like this didn't exist, you'd really have to actively search for these things on your own to see that there's a whole other side of things. There's a whole other history out there that isn't always public.
It's interesting. When I was making the film, I went to Kansas City, where there's a big jazz museum, and I went there looking for footage on some of the black women artists, which I did find. But while I was there, I saw a poster on a display there, which was the laws of Jim Crow.
Mm.
And when I saw that, it just struck me so deeply, because like you, I had heard about it. But to actually see it codified on a poster that said there shall be no marriage between blacks and whites,
Right.
and no black child shall attend a white school, and to see these things, I suddenly realized that was when the story opened up for me and went beyond just the story of the women, but how this story was part of the entire history of the United States. So, like you said, the film goes beyond just talking about the women and goes into this entire background of what this all was taking place against. So,
yeah, it's really something what they had to endure. And you think about them, especially the early ones, in their lifetime, they were probably young, but in their lifetime, women just had the right to vote.
right.
So you go into that, and then you have all this other segregation stuff, and then you're just inspired to blow a horn like a man is by listening to music, and you want to do that for a living. I don't know why any of them. It just must be this drive to want to make music, need to make music, because why wouldn't you just pack that in?
Well, you're absolutely right, because I experienced the same thing. When I was about 12, I played trumpet in my junior high school band. And I could see after a year of playing trumpet in the band that this was not going to be a career for me, because the guys were really mean to me and didn't want me on the band. And I just said, the heck with it. I've got other fish to fry.
Right.
Because I also was interested in theater, and I was a dancer at the time. So I went and pursued my other creative endeavors.